Hello everyone. Some weeks ago, I announced on Reddit that I had beaten the complete Winds of Change quest series solo. In this video, I'm gonna explain how I did each of the 35 quests. I just want to start by highlighting the fact that Shade has been way ahead of me, reaching the 31st quest with his solo assassin before I even started the first quest. I would probably never have tried Winds of Change otherwise. So if after this video you still want to see some Winds of Change solo content, I recommend you go check his YouTube channel by clicking on the link below. Also, I want to precise that if you haven't done this quest series yet, you should definitely give it a try. It's challenging, gives you access to 2 additional heroes, and in my opinion, the story is very well written, smartly treating profound problems of the society, and NPCs you meet are very interesting and well developed. As always, for this challenge, I used my mesmer with the same rules as before. As I said, there are 35 quests in the Winds of Change quest series, and if you don't want to go through the whole video, you can jump to the parts that you are interested in. I'm gonna start with the, let's say, most basic quests. Basic because the objective was just to kill some enemies. For the first quest, I used some allies I still had from the quests Welcome to Kantha, so it was fairly easy. Later on, I still often had the ally the quest gives you with me, who was somewhat useful. In the whole Winds of Change series, even if it's normal mode, enemies are very strong with dual professions and OP synergies. For example, you face Necro-Rit or Rit Necro minion masters, mesmers, exploiting the fast casting ability to cast Ellie spells faster, dagger or hammer ranger with pets, melees with TP skill, strong healers, prot monks, and so on. Enemies also had a lot of skills in their bar, which means that skills to disable them, that I found very useful for my Vanquisher for example, were underperforming here. For example, Power Lock, Diversion, Complicates. Another tough part is that enemies with the same name could have different abilities, which reduces the anticipation power you can have, and that I personally find very useful for solo gameplay and even normal gameplay. I've played Guild Wars a lot and pretty much know the build any regular monster uses, so getting back to a gameplay where I was half blind definitely was a disturbing experience. The build diversity was huge and I had to find a way to kill despite this diversity, and most of the time the best way to achieve that was to use my good old PI build with Wastrels. Most of the time the way to go was to abuse the reach range, at least to kill the melees or some annoying casters, or to spike packed enemies to take down some of them very quickly. A good thing though is that enemies had no raise skills, contrary to War in Krita, in which raise are pretty common. So to get back to the quests, first you have to beat the Afflicted, later the Amphas, the J Brotherhoods, Sensalis, and eventually the Ministry. They were all hard to beat, but the Ministry was significantly harder than the others. I'm gonna go back to this point, but the main reason was that some of the Ministry enemies had very odd AI. The next one I'm gonna talk about is Tracking the Corruption, the one that takes place in the marketplace. As you can imagine, I could not do this quest the intended way, because even with heroes, it's very easy to be overwhelmed by the number of enemies since you are in a very small area and can't really escape. Fortunately, I had followed what Shades did in this one and used the same tactics, use Aura of the Lich, Berata's aura to glitch outside of the marketplace before being overwhelmed, and then safely kill the enemies from outside. Even from outside, killing the enemies was not that easy, because I had basically only 6 kills, no elite skill and less attribute points. Aura of the Lich helped a little bit to pull some enemies, and otherwise I could just wait for them to randomly get closer. Once all the enemies I could reach were dead, it was still not over. I had to glitch back inside the marketplace and kill the remaining enemies, starting by this assassin that I maybe could have killed by waiting a little bit more. The big issue was that once I was back in the marketplace, the stupid monk NPC wanted to get back to me, and while doing that he could have drawn all the enemies on me. I was lucky because he died before this happened and then raised in safety. I killed the remaining group by pulling them one by one and running away from the assassin with illusion of haste, which is a skill I hate but somehow was useful here because it allowed me to have a permanent IMS. After my announcement on Reddit, some people immediately questioned how it was possible to do the quests that require you to protect the NPCs. And that's a very good question actually, and was a big reason why I thought solo Winds of Change would be impossible at the beginning. Well, for some of them, the solution was very easy. Most of you probably know the trick of using Blood is Power to sacrifice HP, which makes the healer NPC follow you in the quest's Cleansing of Eiju Lagoon. Well, this trick worked as well in Trading Blows, in which you need to protect the Kurziks, Ever Closer to the Edge, in which you need to protect the Luxons, and even in the very scary raid on Qingjia Monastery. For this last one, the only guy that needs to survive is Menlo, and bringing him up here made him completely safe. In Cleansing Heiju Lagoon, the quest ends after a certain time, so you don't even need to fight. But for the others, I still had to pull carefully and to kill the enemies with a suboptimal build. In both the Kurzik and Luxon areas, enemies fight each other, so this helps a bit. And if ever I was in a bad spot, the healers I drew away from the combat are pretty good healers. In Qingjia Monastery, it was definitely way too scary to bring the enemies on Menlo, so I went to the opposite side of the map to slowly pull and kill the birds, again without PI sadly. But this was the way to go since I could not even survive the first of the 5 waves by doing it the normal way. Anyway, that's just some quests. If you have completed the Winds of Change quest series, you probably remember other quests in which you need to protect NPCs. Usually a very traumatizing one is the quest in Minister Shaw's estate, in which you need to find and save 3 peasants. Now this quest was not as hard as you could imagine. First, because it's a quest adapted to 4 people, which means less enemies than those adapted for 8-man groups, but also because the peasant is invulnerable as long as you don't approach too close. Which means that I could simply pull the group threatening the peasant and kill it while the peasant was invulnerable. Another one that phenocopied the same idea is the quest A Favor Returns, in which you need to save very weak level 13 henchmen from Yetis. Again, there is a strategy that is mentioned on the wiki to keep the henchmen invulnerable. You need to quickly get to the cave before the dialogue from the first guy you meet ends. However, this quest was a bit harder because I stayed in the cave to fight, and it was not easy to both resist and kill those big Yetis. Hopefully the Necros attack with longbow range, which allowed me to kill the melees while being safe from the spells from the castles. A quest that required a lot of theory crafting was a chance encounter. A very famous quest because that's where a lot of people farm OS weapons and ministerial commendations. But the first part of this quest is not that trivial solo. You need to protect Miku and the place is very narrow. And of course, Miku only starts following you once all the NPCs turned red, bringing all of them on you. So the tactics I used was to run away and use Make Haste on Miku so that she runs faster to get away from the fight. Once on the boat, only fast melees had followed and I could resist them half of the time. It was important to not pull the enemies too close from Miku afterwards because she has a TP skills and would aggro everything again. So I carefully killed the enemies one by one. Once this is done, you need to leave the place and have to defeat the 2 bosses, which was quite feasible since I had some room to move and they don't deal much damage, assuming you don't stay in Ray of Jesus. Now there are still other quests in which you need to protect some NPCs. For these ones, no way to make them invulnerable or follow you out of combat, especially when the NPC is a fucking gate. The only plan available was therefore to be aggressive enough to kill the enemies before the NPC died. In Warning the Anxious and Free Birds, it was manageable because the allies with me were very strong and could heal me if I was in a bad spot. In There Goes the Neighborhoods, I used again my fellow allies to help me going through the quest, even though I think I could have done it without them by tryharding a bit. And of course there is finally the raid on Canaan Center quests. Again, no way to make the gate move, and you can't even heal it, so the only way was to defend the best I could. Surprisingly, it went pretty smoothly. Mesmer is very strong against packed enemies, so I just had to be very aggressive and be a bit lucky to complete this one. Next one is the rescue attempt, and this one was very tough. In this quest, the objective is quite simple. You need to bring Miku to the end of the Tanakai mission. However, there are a lot of mystery enemies on the way, and it's time to talk about the mystery awful characteristics. These guys have infinite leash range, which means that the only way to break aggro beyond killing them is to make enough distance with them. But the only way to make enough distance is to use a huge TP skill like Shadow of Haste or Recall, because even dash is not enough to distance their melees that have naturally increased movement speed. Since I couldn't exploit the leash range technique, even killing the first group I encountered was extremely hard. But in this quest there are many other problems. There is no shrine to raise. If you die, go back to outpost. And also half of the enemies are coded to automatically raise. Therefore fighting was a dead option and running was the only solution. For those who follow a little bit my adventure, you know that running is something I often struggle with. In these quests it's particularly hard because some enemies can remove enchantments despite shadow form, because they have snares that don't need a target like Frozen Burst or Cripple, and also because you don't have a lot of spots or time available to recover, and because, as I said, enemies are very fast. For Cripple, since I don't use PB only skills, my only option was Illusion of Haste, and I didn't have any way to prevent knockdowns. So it definitely was a struggle. When finally reaching the end, I had Shadow of Haste to break aggro with the ministry guys that were following me. But the mission is not over at this point, because it's not you but Miku who needs to reach the end of the mission, and Miku couldn't obviously follow me the first time. Fortunately, enemies are coded to go to the end of the mission once you get there, which means that once I reached the end spot, I could come back to the beginning to bring Miku with me. After that, I could use Shadow of Haste to make her reach the middle of the room where it ended the mission. Before moving to the hardest quest, I'm just gonna mention the two quests that were very easy. The one that you need to do solo, in which you just have to escape, so no problem. And the one where you need to escort the peasants through Wagering Bazaar, which also is very easy if you use Paragon Shouts. And now come the one where I spent the most time, finding Jinnai. I remember these quests being a nightmare to do as a group. To give you a brief overview of the quests, Miku and Jinnai are your allies. They follow you around and raise indefinitely and almost immediately as soon as there are no more enemies around. Miku has some nice damage, Jinnai has some traps but is quite passive overall. The only thing you need to do is to kill all the enemies without dying once. Ministry enemies spawn once you get closer to Jinnai. They spawn as small groups of 4 random enemies, except the first group that has 5 enemies. The spawns occur every 30 seconds to 1 minute from 2 spots, the north gate and the south gate. Once spawned, enemies patrol forever, either clockwise or counterclockwise, and try to kill any enemy they detect, whether it's Miku, Jinnai, or you. As mentioned earlier, since these enemies are from the ministry, their melees runs faster and they don't have a leash range. But there is another specificity. In these quests, all the groups except the very first one have extended aggro range, way bigger than the usual run. This way, even though they don't go everywhere, they can basically detect you almost wherever you are. That's why you usually can't find a place to stay safe and pull the enemies. Also, last information, there are 2 pairs of teleporters that you can use to teleport, and there are some huge traps that can almost one-shot enemies, but these traps trigger only once and seem to require Jinnai to be close to trigger. Miku, Jinnai, and enemies cannot take the teleporters. As a group, people usually either stay at the cemetery or stay with Jinnai. In any case, they often end up being overwhelmed if they don't kill the enemies fast enough. I've tried a bunch of tactics. Trying to run to escape the enemies was impossible. since they were patrolling everywhere and they ran faster than me, even if I abused the teleporters. Then, trying to kill the enemies where they spawn, I still ended up being chased. And at some point I felt like I was out of idea and began to believe that this was the end of the solo Winds of Change adventure. But I insisted and gathered more and more knowledge, which slowly materialized in an idea that could work, at least in theory. And of course, I'm gonna share this idea with you. It quickly appeared that the only way to have some time to think was to hide in the cemetery without Miku and Jinnai. So the first part of the plan was to let Miku at one teleporter, let Jinnai where he is at the beginning, and hide in the cemetery. Despite being somewhat safe, I had no idea how to defeat all the enemies from here. Once up there, this is what happened. Jinnai could not come with me because he could not find the routes. Miku did not come either because she was far away. Thanks to their high detection range, enemies that spawned at the south gate detected me immediately, except the very first group, which was already patrolling. Yet these enemies could not find a way to reach me, so they just stayed below. Enemies spawning at the north gate started patrolling, killed Miku, then reached Jinnai, killed him, then continued their routes without noticing me, killed Miku again, and so on. I noticed that sometimes enemy at the south gate eventually found a way to reach me. I found several explanations. When at the south gates, they noticed both me and Jinnai. By trying to reach both of us, they were slowly getting closer from my position until they were close enough to figure out the route to reach me. This did not happen with all the enemies because some of them would never try to attack or cast anything on Jinnai. Another thing that could make the enemies get close enough to figure out the way to reach me was when Aura of the Lich Necros suicided by spamming Verata's Sacrifice and other spells while under Masochism. Indeed, enemies could get closer when they were attacking the then masterless minions. I further noticed that I could pull the enemies myself by going towards the north. It was very tough, but by doing it again and again, I figured out I could pull them almost one by one by doing baby steps. Of course, this pulling needed to be done when no patrol was around, otherwise these patrols noticed me as well. But another difficulty added up, and to understand it, you need to know what corpse aggro is. When you kill an enemy, its corpse stays on the ground for 45 seconds, unless it's a boss, and in this case it stays forever. As long as the dead body is there, it still has an aggro range, which means that even if you break aggro from a team, they can notice you back just because you entered the detection range of the dead body. Now if we come back to Jinnai, let's say I killed an Ely here. Sometimes, thanks to the dead body, the patrols that wouldn't have detected me otherwise can see me through the dead body. Which means that I not only had to pull the enemies while there was no patrol, but also ideally had to kill the enemy by considering that if a patrol was passing by, some corpse aggro could occur. In any case, I had the second step of the plan figured out, kill all the enemies spawning south from my spot in the cemetery by pulling one by one. But a big question remains, how to kill all the other patrolling groups? Nightquist, another creative member of the solo community, was doing some testing himself from time to time. At some point, he used the Century Stays as a way to corner block the melees, a technique well known in Speed Clear. I liked this idea because it gave me a way to deal with some groups. Indeed, from these spots, I could be safe from at least some melees while I was killing casters with Echoed PI. From this point, I decided to add a new step just after triggering Jinnai, try to kill the first group spawning from north using the stairs if he needed. This way I only had in theory 4 patrols left from the north and the big one with small aggro range from the south. I had some hope because the less patrols there were, the longer the enemies were stuck killing Jinnai or Miku over and over. Within this time window, I was hoping I maybe would have enough time to kill the weakest of the remaining patrols. And that's what happened. After having defeated the enemies that spawned at the south gates, I spent a lot of time to study the different groups, picked the easiest one to kill, and killed it when it was isolated from the other groups. This group had a SOS Minion Master Rit, and as I told you before, those have a very weird AI, and the Rit didn't want to come my way. I tried to lower my HP with the Vamp weapon, but the Rit still didn't care. Later, by trying to pull this Rit, I pulled Jinnai to me, which at this point I thought was a big mistake. Fortunately, Jinnai was still far enough to not aggro the patrols. After having waited for another 30 minutes, a good opportunity happened, and I could pull another group I thought I could kill. And I think the best way for you to see what happened is to show you. Okay, let's rage. It's time. Oh, nice. Nice trap. No, there is another group. Fuck. Oh, that's the group with the pets. Fuck. No. Okay, let's say they forgot about me. They didn't, fuck. What should I do? Come on, use your heal. Nice. Oh no, there is a group here. Oh no, it's not a group. Shit, no, I didn't mean to do that. No. Run. Okay, wait. Who's this guy? Should I go here? Nah, it's too risky, right? Man, they don't care about Jinnai at all. Oh, please don't see me. Oh no, they are gonna see Jinnai. No, Jinnai! Man, I can't kill this fucking guy. Nice. Okay, the ranger died. This is fine. Let's go back in safety. Yes! After that, I could use Miku and Jinnai to kill the two remaining patrols. And it was done. Jinnai, the raids of Kenang Center and Xingjia Monastery, and all the quests in which I had to protect the NPC were done. Yet, I was still extremely scared by the last step of this journey, fighting Rico, the Guild Wars 2 mesmer boss. I was afraid because I remember that in this quest there is no shrine, that ministry enemies keep spawning over and over, and that the quest gets harder and harder when you damage Reiko. Also, Reiko and her clones are able to summon copies of me and Miku, which means fighting enemies with very strong builds. However, the quest ended up not being that bad for different reasons. I had a huge number of allies who followed me as soon as I had succeeded to keep them with me for long enough. Reiko and her illusions could be pulled one by one. Her illusion died naturally after a certain amount of time. Reiko always spawned her illusion in the same area. Reiko's ability to summon a copy of an enemy was easy to interrupt. Also, I could use Spiritual Pain to differentiate Reiko from her illusion pretty easily. With all of this, the Winds of Change quest series ended on the 11th of November 2024. I plan on releasing the VOD of the quests that I think are interesting, and you can already find the whole Jinnai run on my Twitch by following the link below. If you want to see one quest in particular, don't hesitate to tell me and I probably will add it as well. Anyway, this challenge was extremely interesting and refreshing, and I learned a lot. It also showed that boundaries can still be pushed even in 2024. Who knows which one is the next?